All right. So, first question is from Jen. So, Jen asks, what are your thoughts about waking up and having coffee and waking up and having water? I've seen mixed reviews. On rest days, I drink coffee before water, but on workout days, I drink water. Is there a big difference? Should I focus on drinking water first before coffee? It probably really doesn't matter. And also, like, something to consider too is like, you're talking about drinking water first or coffee first. But how long is it going until, or how long are you going until you're drinking the other thing, right? Like if you were to tell me, hey, I drink just coffee, a cup of coffee first thing in the morning, and then I don't have any water for another 3 or 4 hours, that's a totally different scenario versus if you had coffee first thing in the morning and then 30 minutes later you had water. The second scenario, having 30-minute or water 30 minutes later after coffee, it's probably honestly not making that much of a difference because it's just 30 minutes and you're essentially having them almost at the same time. Now, if you're going multiple hours after just having coffee and then having water, that's a long period of time, right? I think a good strategy to just have on rest days, workout days, whatever day it is first thing in the morning, probably have a good 20 to 30 ounces of water like right when you wake up. That's probably a good idea just because you've gone, 8 hours from not drinking anything, likely from, the 7 hours you were maybe sleeping and maybe the hour or two extra you were laying in bed. So it's probably a good idea to, get some water in there. Now, coffee is going to have some water in it, but you're probably not having 20 to 30 ounces of coffee first thing in the morning, which I hope you're not having that much coffee right away, that early. So I think a good rule of thumb is like 20 to 30 ounces of water first thing in the morning. Kind of chug it a little bit. Don't make yourself feel super uncomfortable. But, when I fill up my water bottle first thing in the morning, I'll just sit there right when I fill it up and probably try to chug, good 20 ounces right there. And then I'll have another few sips as I'm kind of preparing my breakfast. And then I sit down and I have my breakfast and I have a cup of coffee with it within probably, I would say, 30 to 45 minutes of waking up, but I'm still having the water with it or before. So I don't think it's a thing as far as what should you have before or after. Have them kind of together, but I would say probably prioritize like having just the water first. Just it's a good habit to have. I don't think it's making a ton of difference, but I do think just being hydrated in general first thing in the morning is a good thing, especially if you are working out in the mornings as well, because you're waking up in kind of a dehydrated state. So getting that fluid in, getting that hydration back up before starting your workout or even your day in general is a good thing. So I would go with water first, but like if you have coffee 15 minutes after you have your water, that's not really a big deal. Which I just want to touch on this too. There has been this kind of like thought thrown out there is that you should delay coffee 90 minutes before or after waking up because it raises cortisol and that causes a bunch of issues. There's really not a lot of strong research indicating that. But there is a lot of strong research indicating that if you have coffee too late in the day, it can impact your sleep more that night. And that could be negative. So I think for most people, if you're going to have caffeine or coffee, I think it's more important to probably have it as early in the day as possible and cut it off as early in the day as you can. So that way it's impacting your sleep later on that night less versus stressing about waiting 90 minutes to have your coffee. Because if waiting 90 minutes to have your coffee pushes your next coffee off and now you're having your second coffee at like 2 p.m., I'd rather have you have that first coffee right when you wake up. So then you have your second coffee an hour and a half earlier, and now you're cutting your caffeine off at 12:30 instead of 2, and now that gives you just an hour and a half extra for your body to metabolize that caffeine before you go to sleep. So I know that wasn't part of your question, but just a little thing. I think people are really stressing about like when they have their coffee in the morning and trying to delay it for, 90 minutes because of the whole cortisol response, which isn't really that strong of research behind there. And there's stronger research indicating we probably want to cut caffeine off as early as possible in the day. So, like, I'm not saying wake up and brush your teeth with coffee first thing in the morning, but there's no reason to purposely probably delay it, more than it needs to be delayed. So, next question is from Vicky. So she asks, can you eat too much protein if you stay within your calorie range? So I guess this question is like a follow up would be can you eat too much protein for what? Do you mean like that eating too much protein is going to harm your kidneys or harm your health in some way? Because I know that's, an idea that has been a myth for a while. Do you have this thought of, if I eat too much protein but stay within my calorie range, am I going to gain body fat then? Like that's another thing. So we have to think about too much protein, but like what is the end result that you're afraid of happening, right? When it comes to kidney health, health in general, you're not going to overdo protein. Like you would have to eat extraordinarily high amounts of protein day in and day out for a long period of time to see any kind of negative impact on your kidneys, unless you currently have kidney issues like chronic kidney disease. If you don't have any chronic kidney disease, your kidneys are not compromised, you can process really high amounts of protein, honestly. Like you'd probably have to eat, I don't know, over 400 grams of protein like day in and day out to probably see any kind of noticeable impact on like strain on your kidneys or anything. So I wouldn't like worry about going over on protein in that aspect. For the aspect of fat loss or fat gain, no downsides as long as you're staying within your calorie range. Like your calorie range is going to dictate your energy balance. So if you are within your calorie range and that calorie range is appropriate for you to not gain weight or not gain body fat, eating a higher protein intake is within that calorie range is not going to cause any extra body fat. So like let's say if you burn 2,000 calories a day, somebody who burns 2,000 calories a day and they eat 200 grams of protein, they're not going to like gain body fat if they're burning 2,000 per day and eating 2,000 calories per day versus someone else who's eating 2,000 calories a day and they're eating 120 grams of protein. So it's not going to cause any extra fat gain. And, on the flip side, like actually protein is a little bit less likely to be stored as body fat. So if you do overeat any macronutrient, so the three macronutrients are protein, carbs, and fats, if you overeat any of them, overeating protein is going to like usually lead to less fat gain. And there are different mechanisms that we can kind of like talk about at some point regarding that. But just to like keep it simple, like protein is actually less likely to be stored as body fat. So that's the one macronutrient that like if you do overeat, it's probably not going to lead to as much fat gain versus the other two. But it all still does come down to calorie balance though. Like if you go way over your calories and your protein is super high, there will be probably some body fat accumulation, even there. But you also don't want to overdo protein purposely either, because if you are overdoing protein excessively, it's not going to cause any extra fat gain. It's not going to damage your kidneys to an extreme amount or anything like that. But it just will take away like some of the nutrients or vitamins, minerals that are beneficial from us or for us that you could be getting from carbs and fats. So, let's say if like there's something that's really fun that you like to do, like you like to, I don't know, let's just say, I don't know, hobby, you like to go dancing, right? And let's say if you spent every waking hour that you have free time dancing. Well, now you'd probably miss out on other fun things that you like to do. Maybe spending time with your family, maybe watching your favorite TV show. So you don't want to spend all of that extra time on dancing, or you're going to take away from other things that bring you joy too, that are beneficial for your life. Kind of an analogy that goes along with protein. Like protein is great, but once you've kind of reached your max amount of protein that like your body's really going to get all the benefits from, going way over that isn't really that beneficial either, because then it's going to take away calories that you could be getting from healthy carbs that contain a lot of fiber that are good for gut health, digestion. You're going to also take away a lot of calories that could be used for healthy fats too, which are really good for brain health, joint health, among other things. So we want enough to stimulate the most amount of like muscle recovery, muscle growth, and to support all the other systems that use protein too. But going over that excessively, especially if you're doing it purposely, if you're like, oh, my protein goal is 120, but I want to get extra credit and hit 170 every day, those extra 50 grams of protein, like you could be using that to have some more fruits, have some more whole grains, which are going to give you more fiber, like I said, for your gut health, for digestion. And also those extra carbs are going to fuel your workouts a little bit better than protein too. Protein's good for recovery from workouts, but once you kind of max out that recovery, you're not fueling your workouts with protein. So filling those extra calories in with not extra protein, but with extra healthy carbohydrates, that's going to help to fuel your performance in the gym a little bit more. So there's nothing like bad about it. Can you eat too much? I would say the short answer is you can eat too much protein within your calorie range, only if it causes you then to eat super low amounts of carbs and fats to where you start to deal with negative side effects there. But that's kind of a result of the carbs and fats being so low, not necessarily the protein being high, if that makes sense. But hopefully that answers your question there, Vicky. So, Peggy, I sent a message a few weeks ago, so I'll ask here. Yeah, by the way, if you have any question, post it in the group. Don't message me on this platform. This platform isn't for like messaging me questions one on one. Now, if you have a question of like, how do I access the workouts or something that's technical, I'm okay with you direct messaging me there. But if it's like a question like this regarding your journey, leave those to like the Q&As or on the feed, just because like if you're going to message me one-on-one with questions specific to your journey, that's kind of trying to get like one-on-one coaching, but this isn't a one-on-one coaching group, right? So make sure you post those questions in here so I see them. But and better yet, if you do post it like in a separate post, like Peggy's questions here, she posted in a Q&A post, so I'm gonna see it. But if you post it in like your question in a separate post, make sure you tag me in it too, or I might not see it too. But her question was, 4 weeks ago, I injured my shoulder and strained a muscle severely in my upper back when lifting. My own fault due to pushing myself really hard that day. I went to the doctor and was diagnosed with shoulder bursitis and strained muscles, was given a prednisone shot, muscle relaxer, was told not to work out until no pain. I tried working out last week. It was okay. Today there was severe pain again. My question is, until I can use weights again, what are your recommendations? So first off there, that question, because I know there are a couple other parts to your question here. Until you can use weights again, do activity that just doesn't require weights. If your doctor's saying wait until there's no pain and you did try working out and you had severe pain the next day, it's probably worth still giving it a break, right? So I would just do any other kind of activity that's not lifting weights. So it could be a Peloton, could be some kind of cardio dance class like Zumba, I think that's what they're called. You could be doing like go for a run. You could do the elliptical, walk on an incline, play pickleball, anything that just doesn't require lifting weights or doesn't irritate that muscle or shoulder is what I would do. Probably not what you want to hear because it sounds like you want to get back to the weights. But if it's going to cause you extreme pain the next day after doing that, then it's worth waiting. Another alternative too is like figuring out what exercises trigger it and don't trigger it. Like if you're having a shoulder issue, you might be perfectly fine doing some exercises still. So like it might be bench pressing or shoulder pressing that really irritate your shoulder, but maybe like doing a lat pull down or doing a seated cable row doesn't really bother your shoulder much. So maybe do those exercises that you can do too. Or also, maybe all upper body exercises irritate your shoulder, but doing lower body, doing like Romanian deadlifts, doing squats or leg press or leg extension, any of those lower body exercises, especially ones with machines, maybe those don't irritate your shoulder. So really think about, okay, like what other activity can I do to stay active that doesn't involve the weights, that's not irritating my shoulder? And then also, what other lifting exercises can I maybe still do that don't cause that pain? And let me at least do those. That's worth doing. I think a lot of times people fall into this all or nothing mindset where they're like, well, I can't do the program perfectly because my shoulder hurts, so I'm just not going to lift weights at all. But there likely are probably some exercises still you maybe can do. And if not, then just do those more cardio based type exercises. And that's still really beneficial for your health, beneficial for keeping your energy expenditure up. And it's still going to work your muscles a little bit, not as much for muscle building as lifting weights will, but it's going to be better than nothing. So I would go there. Now, your other parts of your question, I was finally at a good calorie increase and wondering if I should go back into a fat loss range. So I think this depends on how much lifting you can actually do. I think if you can't do any lifting, unless you have like some really pertinent health issue where like your blood pressure is really high or blood cholesterol is really high or dealing with diabetes to where like, hey, I need to lose weight because I need to get my blood work in check. Unless you're in that spot, I like to wait to do a fat loss phase until I can consistently lift weights and hit the muscles that I want to hit. Because every time you do go into a fat loss phase, you do run a little bit of a risk of losing muscle. And lifting weights, resistance training is a great way to prevent that from happening, to where everything you do lose is going to be body fat for the most part. But if you're severely limited in your lifting and you can't lift at all, and you go into a fat loss phase, there's a good chance you might lose some muscle, and like that doesn't feel great, and you're going to see the weight of the scale go down, but maybe you're not going to be as happy with like your maintenance of muscle during that process. If you're able to do at least like 75% of your lifting exercises, like I mentioned, maybe you're able to do a lot of upper body exercises still, but just have to cut out a couple, or maybe you're still able to do a lot of lower body exercises too, then I think it probably would be fine to do a fat loss phase still. Because you're still working most of your muscles with lifting resistance training, and that's going to help to maintain a lot of your muscle there. So I think it just kind of depends on how important for your health is it that you lose body fat right now. And if it is really important, then go into a fat loss phase now, and you might lose a little bit of muscle, maybe not. If you stay really active with a lot of the cardio based stuff, that might be enough to still maintain a good amount of muscle for a short period of time until you're able to start actually doing the full lifting workouts again. But if you're dealing with any of those health issues, like prioritize that, right? You can build back some of that muscle once you're able to start lifting again. If you are at a healthy body weight, you're not dealing with any health issues, and it's just purely aesthetics, like, hey, like, I'm healthy, but I just kind of want to lose a little bit of these love handles, I think it's probably worth waiting until you can actually lift more, unless you can do, like I said, 75% of your lifting exercises still. But if you can't lift at all and you're doing this purely because, hey, I just don't want this little flab, on my lower belly, I think it's probably worth at least waiting a few weeks until to see if like your shoulder heals up then. And then if your shoulder ends up being a thing that is irritated for a longer period of time, like for multiple months, then maybe just say, hey, I'm going to start a fat loss phase early because I don't want to wait multiple months to start the fat loss phase just because this irritating shoulder thing. And then just thinking, when my shoulder feels better, I'll kind of work my way back up with the weights there. So hopefully that answers that question there. And then your third question is when I can begin lifting again. Do I jump back into where I was or start over like my first time lifting each week? So you definitely want to start with lower weights, when you've taken significant time off. You want to do it to prevent injury. You want to do it because your strength is probably going to go down a little bit just from taking time off. Like strength is a very skill-based thing. Even if you didn't lose any muscle from taking, let's say, 2 weeks off of lifting, because you didn't practice the skill of those movements for 2 weeks, your strength is probably going to be a little bit lower. So I don't think a lot of people realize that. I think people think like if you have the same amount of muscle, you should be just as strong. But if you haven't done certain exercises in a couple of weeks, you kind of lose that skill a little bit. So your strength is probably going to go down a little bit. So like you're going to want to decrease your weight a little bit just purely from that, from your skill of the exercises being a little bit lower from taking time off. You also want to decrease the weight a little bit and not go into it as intensely because your body has spent some time not having that stimulus. So if you go and work out after 2 weeks off, you're going to be really sore if you really push yourself, which then is going to make your next workout even tougher to follow through with because you're going to just be like almost unbearably sore. Like, some of you have probably taken time off from the gym and went and then did like a crazy lower body workout, your first workout back, and then it's just impossible to like walk up the stairs or sit on the toilet. We don't want that to happen. Like that extreme muscle damage and soreness isn't really a good thing. You're better off easing into it. So I would take things lighter when you jump back into it because of that. And then also I probably would maybe even shorten your workouts. And like, if let's say the workouts say to do 3 sets per exercise, maybe it's just do 2 sets per exercise. And then maybe on week 2, now you go back up to 3 sets per exercise. So there's 2 different ways we can kind of bring the intensity of our workouts down or the difficulty of it down. One is to use less weight, so we're not getting as close to failure and we're easing back into things that way. And the second way is to do less sets, so we're not doing so much volume, which is what it's called, like how many sets and reps you're doing total overall. We're doing less sets and then building those sets back up to where they were before. So I would probably do like 2 sets per exercise your first, week back, and probably do maybe like 60% of the weight you're used to doing. And then maybe your second workout back, maybe you do 75, 80% of the weight that you used to do. And then, hopefully by like the second or third week, you're back to doing, the weights that you were doing before. So hopefully that answered all of your questions there, Peggy. So Melinda, she asked week 4 of a fat loss phase, and you have seen 5 pounds lost. Awesome job with that. That's a great pace. And she's seen body composition changes. She took photos at the start and the end of week 4, but the weight has stayed still for 2 of those weeks. We reduce calories at that point, even though body composition is still changing? And then she says, also, please don't say to increase steps because it sounds like the step goal is pretty hard for her to get with her sit down job. So if you are seeing body composition changes, do not change your calorie intake, even if the weight on the scale was not moving at all. Even if you haven't even lost 5 pounds in these 4 weeks, if you're seeing body composition change, there's no reason to change anything. When you're new to a program, and I know Melinda, you've been, I think, in this group for maybe a couple of months, so you're pretty new still. Like, your body is going to build a lot of muscle and lose a lot of fat at the same time. You're going to see some awesome body composition changes without the weight in the scale even needing to move at all. Sometimes even going up. Like, I've had some clients in the first 1 or 2 months where sometimes the weight in the scale has gone up by like a pound or 2. But you look at their pictures and it looks like they've lost 5 to 10 pounds of body fat because of just the, building muscle and losing fat at the same time. So if your body composition change is happening, regardless of even if the scale didn't move at all, do not change anything. Now, especially if you've still lost 5 pounds in 4 weeks, definitely don't change anything, because the weight in the scale isn't going to necessarily go down every week. Like, I know I've probably talked about in here, multiple podcast videos and all that we want to be losing around 1 pound on average per week. That's a good pace of fat loss. But that's what we want to look at over a span of multiple weeks. And it's not always the same for each person, by the way, but in general, when I say that, I don't mean every week we need to be seeing the weight in the scale go down by a pound. I mean, if we take a look at like a snapshot of an 8-week time frame, have we lost maybe close to 6 to 8 pounds on average during that time frame? Now, that could mean losing 4 pounds in the first 2 weeks, and then the next 2 weeks, weight and scale doesn't change at all. And then that could mean the next 2 weeks after that, maybe we lose 3 or 4 pounds. Then the next 2 weeks, we only lose 1 or 2 pounds. Like, your rate of loss per week on the scale is going to fluctuate. And sometimes you're going to have a 1 to 2 week period where you lose like 3 to 4 pounds. And then you're going to have a 1 or 2 week period where it just doesn't change at all. And then the next 1 or 2 week period, you lose another 3 or 4 pounds. And the next 1 to 2 week period doesn't change at all. And just to be clear, it's not that you're losing 4 pounds of fat in 2 weeks, and then the next 2 weeks, you're doing everything perfect, the exact same. And for whatever reason, your body's not losing any fat those next 2 weeks. It's just that it's the fluctuations in water retention. Sometimes there are variables in play where like our body is just retaining more water for 1 or 2 weeks at a time. And it could be because of our period, could be because we didn't have as many bowel movements, could be because we ate more sodium those 1 or 2 weeks, could be hormone fluctuations, stress, could be a variety of things. But there are times where you are going to lose body fat in a week or even in a 2 week span. And you're maybe have lost 2 pounds of body fat, but your body is holding onto 2 pounds extra of water. So it just doesn't show up yet. And then all of a sudden, another 2 weeks go by and your body regulates its body water a little bit more. And then it starts to show up. So you are on a perfect pace that you would want in a fat loss phase, 5 pounds down in 4 weeks on average, over that time span. And even regardless of the changes on the scale, Melinda, you're seeing body composition changes. And that's the most important part anyway, because like you all or most people are doing this not to necessarily lose weight, is you're doing this to lose body fat and see your body composition change. And that's more important than the weight in the scale anyway. But even with the weight in the scale, like it is going down right at the pace that you want. So I wouldn't make any change. I would just keep rolling. If you go 4 weeks of being consistent, tracking your food with 90% accuracy, so like 90% of your foods are weighed and measured using a food scale, not just eyeballed, and you're being consistent with your workouts, your steps, 5, 6, 7 days of the week. And you go 4 weeks and you don't see any change in the scale or any change in your pictures or how your clothes are fitting. If all 3 of those things, there's no change after 4 weeks, then it indicates, okay, maybe it's time to adjust something. But if you're only 1 or 2 weeks in and you're not noticing any change, that's not long enough to really determine if the plan is working or not. You have to kind of take it to that 4 week period, which I know feels like a long period of time. You're like, that's a long period of time to be consistent with something that maybe sometimes I don't feel like is working. But that's just what's needed to meet that threshold to really look, okay, it's been 4 weeks. I've been really consistent, not seeing any change in any area, not just a scale. Then that would indicate, maybe changing something. So Candace, I'm brand new at this. Tomorrow being my first day, she signed up for one-on-one coaching. So super excited, that you got started, Candace. So just learning how to navigate all of this. My mom's birthday dinner is Saturday. Should I avoid the cake or can I have a small piece? So for you specifically, Candace, this first week, remember, I just want you to track your usual food intake and do what you normally would do, normal behaviors. So if you would normally have a piece of cake, have a piece of cake. So this first week, there's no pressure to do anything specific. Now, going forward in general, should you have a piece of cake or should you not have a piece of cake? It's kind of up to you in terms of, do you want that cake? And are you okay with the result of having that cake, whether that being maybe you have a piece of cake and you didn't plan for it accordingly within your calorie and protein range, and then you had the piece of cake and you went over your calories because of that, and now you had maybe 200 or 300 calories more than what your goal was for that day. Are you okay with that result of being like, hey, I went over my calories by a couple hundred calories today and I'm just gonna do better, the next day? Are you okay with that? Or maybe you plan ahead and plug that piece of cake into your day, into your diet and your food log for that day. You plan your breakfast and lunch around it to where now you actually had that piece of cake, fit it within your calorie goal, still hit your protein for the day, and you still stayed on track, right? And you're okay with that result of having to adjust your breakfast and lunch and do that planning ahead to fit it in. Are you okay with that? So throughout this whole process with one-on-one coaching, like, yes, we give you calorie and protein ranges, macronutrient ranges, and everything and goals to hit. But there's nothing necessarily you have to do. You can make a decision to actively overeat. If that's what you actually want to do and consciously want to do, you just have to be okay with the result of that of, hey, maybe I gained some body fat today, but it is what it is. I just really wanted to have this cake. I'm not going to beat myself up about it. That's kind of a requirement of this. Like, don't beat yourself up. You made the decision, just kind of own it and be like, hey, I had the piece of cake. I went over my calories. I probably didn't hit my protein. That's okay. I'll do better tomorrow. Like, that's a perfectly fine approach to take. Now, my advice with this is, and like, to answer the question for you specifically, like, I'll be able to answer it better as we move forward with coaching because I like to learn clients' tendencies and how they think when I answer questions like this. But in general, for the majority of people, especially if I know they're tracking their food and they have a calorie goal, plug in what a piece of cake would roughly be. Even if it's a rough estimate, a piece of cake, depending on how big it is, obviously, probably going to be maybe 250 to 300 calories or so. So find a piece of cake on MyFitnessPal that you can log and choose a portion size that comes out to probably around, 250 calories or so worth, maybe 300 or more if it's a big piece of cake you plan to have. But I probably recommend having like a moderately sized piece of cake, if not small. Choose one that's about 250 calories worth maybe, and then plug the rest of your day around it. So then if your calorie goal for the day is 2000 and your protein goal is 120 grams, you fit that piece of cake within that budget, right? It's like if you had this new TV you wanted to buy in a given month and you have other expenses that you have to account for. You probably plug that TV in and then adjust your other expenses accordingly so it would fit around it. And we want to do the same thing with our calorie and protein budget when we want to fit these things in. But there's nothing wrong with fitting in a piece of cake as long as you are hitting your protein still, hitting your calorie range still, which is really important, and choosing mostly whole foods the rest of the day. If you fit 250 calories worth of cake within that, that's perfectly fine. You're going to see great progress still. A lot of people think just because they had cake in a day or had cookies in a day, that just that one food like ruined their whole day because it's processed and now they gain fat. But that's not how physiology works. If you're not going over your calories and you're staying within that calorie range and still hitting your protein, still eating mostly whole foods, still hitting your step goal and workout goals for the week, and you fit in a piece of cake here and there, like, you're not going to see any difference in your progress versus if you didn't have that piece of cake because you're still checking off those other variables. So hopefully that answered your question there, Candace. Lauren asked, is a 3 to 4 week fat loss phase too short? I would like to start one the last week of October. It would take a 1 week maintenance break for Thanksgiving, then a 3 week fat loss phase until the week of Christmas. So I would say 3 weeks is probably the bare minimum I would ever do a fat loss phase. And also it kind of depends on who you are too and how experienced you are, right? Like someone who's a very beginner to tracking their food and fat loss phases and this whole process, I probably wouldn't recommend a 3 week fat loss phase for them because they probably just aren't as consistent as maybe what somebody else would be if they've been like doing this for a couple of years and like they never miss their calorie mark, when they have a calorie goal, or they never miss their protein or never miss workouts. If you're super consistent all the time and you've been really experienced with this, you could lose like a decent amount of body fat in 3 weeks, if you really push things and stay really consistent for that 3 week period. If you are somebody who, like I said, is a beginner and you still struggle with consistency, where like some weeks you're nailing things 6, 7 days, other weeks it's like 3 or 4, and you kind of oscillate between that level of consistency over and over, it's probably not worth doing a 3 or 4 week fat loss phase because like it's not enough time for you to like get going on the runway to like actually see a good amount of progress. And now you're just kind of like forcing yourself to be in a fat loss phase for, a few weeks when like you're not going to get as much out of it. In your case, Lauren, because I know your circumstance and situation, I think you probably would be fine doing like a 3 week fat loss phase because, I've worked with you one-on-one as a client and, you're always typically really consistent. The only caveat I would give for you is that like, I don't know if you really need to do a fat loss phase during the holidays. Um, like if you have maybe a vacation in January that you really want to feel lean for, like you're going to a beach vacation, then I can maybe understand that trade-off of, okay, like I'm going on vacation or I have something that I really want to be lean for in January. I'm going to like, knuckle through it, white knuckle through it, or whatever the saying is, and bite the bullet and like be in a fat loss phase during those, holiday weeks in the midst of like Thanksgiving and Christmas to try to feel lean for that. Like I would maybe understand that. But if you don't have anything like that planned for you, I would eat more. I would eat closer to maintenance. I would focus on building muscle over November, December, and maybe even January. And then I would start a fat loss phase like in February, probably. And that way you can have like a good 2 or 3 months in a fat loss phase, maybe even up to 4, like with diet breaks in between. I don't think you should do that long of a fat loss phase yourself straight without a diet break. But with you, like I would focus on building more muscle over the holidays unless there's a really, really good reason to be in a fat loss phase during them. But I would focus on building muscle over the time frame because like you're going to have more probably temptations, more good food available to you that tastes really good. So you're going to want those extra calories probably. It's going to be more convenient to have them. You're going to have more flexibility. And then that way you can, like I said, spend the spring if you really want to get leaner in just like a more structured fat loss phase without as many potential roadblocks going into the summer, right? Like that's a better timeline to probably be in versus forcing a fat loss phase over the holidays. And then like, you lose the fat you want to lose over the holidays. And now January and February rolls around. And yeah, you could always go into a maintenance or muscle building phase then, but I think it just makes sense to take advantage of the holiday months, eating more food, focusing on maintenance and building muscle during that time, like when it's just more convenient to do that during that time. Like in anybody else listening to this, I think that's a good approach to take for really almost anybody if they don't have health issues they're concerned with, or they're not dealing with current aches and pains because they are, really overweight, or your blood pressure isn't high, or, your blood sugar isn't high. If you're not dealing with any of those health issues and you're just like wanting to lose fat for purely aesthetic reasons, like you're better off taking advantage of the holidays to eat around maintenance and, enjoy that extra food, build more muscle, push yourself in the gym, get stronger, focus on getting stronger every single week. And then, doing a little bit of a fat loss phase, a little bit of a cut, after the holidays come January, maybe February. Like that's a better timeline for you if you're not trying to lose weight immediately now for health reasons. So hopefully that answered your question, Lauren. Like I said, I think it's totally fine for you to do, but I don't really think it's ideal for long-term progress to do that. So those are my thoughts. But so Melinda had another question is, let's say you have done the priming phase for 4 to 5 weeks. You have significantly increased calories, tracked your steps accordingly or consistently. How do you know when your body's ready to start a fat loss phase after the priming phase? So for anybody listening, the priming phase is basically a phase we take all of our clients through initially where we build their calories up to the high end of their estimated maintenance calorie level. That way, they are eating plenty of food, their energy is high, they're feeling stronger in their workouts, feeling stronger in the gym. They've built some muscle over these 4 to 5 week period. Sometimes it's longer for some clients, but 4 to 5 weeks roughly before going into a fat loss phase. And that's a really great way to just build these habits too before jumping, not into the deep end, but jumping into like a little bit more of intense fat loss phase. Now, how do you know when your body's ready to start a fat loss phase? So, number one is just numerically, do you have your calories close to or at that approximate maintenance level that you calculated using like a calorie calculator? If you've built your calories up to close to that level or at the high end of that level and numerically you're there, that is one good sign. It's not the telltale all complete sign, but that's one good sign. A second sign that you're probably ready to start a fat loss phase is you're eating at that level, that higher calorie level consistently, day in, day out, like you're consistent with your habits. You're not just some days are at that level and some days are like 400, 500, 600 calories lower. Like you're consistently used to eating that amount and your body's adapted to that. Third thing is, are you feeling pretty like satisfied and full after each meal, at the end of each day, and between meals? If you're dealing with a lot of hunger still, then there's a chance you probably might want to actually increase your calories a little bit more, and maybe even go a little bit higher than that because your body might actually be burning a little bit more than that. But if your hunger is really stable and like you're never really feeling that hungry and you're also feeling pretty full and satisfied at the end of the day too, and you are numerically in that range and you're consistently in that range, that's a good kind of third sign too. Fourth sign is you're having regular bowel movements, roughly maybe every day. Fifth sign is your energy levels in your workouts are really good, like you're feeling really strong and you're progressing week to week, or at least every other week. You're able to add some kind of weight or reps to your workouts, even if it's just like 2.5 pounds here and there. But if you're consistently progressing in the gym and you're eating that high amount, your hunger is good, your digestion is good, and you're consistent at that number, those are all kind of the telltale signs that, hey, like it's probably a good idea to, like I could probably start a fat loss phase now and my body would probably respond. Another good indicator is like, have I been eating this amount at least for a couple of weeks, if not a few weeks? So if you just like jump all the way up to like your maintenance level and just eat it for 1 week, you probably want to spend a couple of weeks, at least maybe even a few weeks at that point, just to make sure like that's a good spot for you to kind of end that priming phase at. So those are kind of the signs there. Like you shouldn't be really hungry. You shouldn't see a lot of inconsistency in your calorie intake. You should have a lot of these habits established too. And that's kind of like the last point is a big part of this priming phase is one, physiologically just making sure your body is in a good low stress state to enter a fat loss phase. But one of the most important things of this priming phase too is like just learning how to be consistent with the plan. Like, with the priming phase, the way we do it with our one-on-one clients, we're measuring how often they're hitting their calorie goal each day, every week. We're seeing how often they're hitting their protein goal each day, each week. We're seeing how often they're hitting their step goal each day, each week during this priming phase. We're also seeing let's say if they have 3 assigned workouts per week, are they completing 3 of those pretty consistently each week? So a big part of this priming phase is building the habits and consistency that you are going to need to be consistent in a fat loss phase. Because if you are really inconsistent with your calorie intake, really inconsistent with your protein, really inconsistent with your steps and your workouts after 4 or 5 weeks of a fat loss phase, 4 or 5 weeks of a priming phase, even though your body physiologically might respond to a fat loss phase well, you don't have the skill and the habits and the consistency down to be successful in the fat loss phase, even if we were to enter it, because everything's so inconsistent. And when everything's so inconsistent, it's really hard to measure if the fat loss phase is working. It's really hard to measure if the plan is working for you physiologically. It's really hard to measure how progress is maybe happening or not happening. So another kind of caveat that's not related to physiology, but it's more habit-based is, are we hitting these targets? Like if I say my calorie range is 2,000 to 2,100, my protein range is 120 to 130, and my step goal is 8,000. Am I able to consistently hit that 5 days out of the week at least, preferably maybe even 6 or 7? And if I'm not able to consistently week after week hit those targets, then I need to work on just the habit of being consistent with those first. Because if I go into a fat loss phase with this like underlying issue of not being consistent, then I'm going to have like some days where I hit my calorie range in fat loss, some days where I don't. And it's going to be, I'm maybe going to hit my fat loss range of calories 3 days out of the 7, or maybe 4 days out of the 7. And in my mind, I'm going to mentally feel like, hey, I'm in a fat loss phase. I should be losing fat because my spreadsheet or whatever, my documents say I'm in a fat loss phase. The calorie range that Joey is giving me says I'm in a fat loss phase. I should be losing fat. But your consistency isn't there to actually match that. And then you get to a point where it's been maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks in a fat loss phase. And maybe I haven't lost that much body fat because I haven't been as consistent, but my mind feels like I was in a fat loss phase for 5 or 6 weeks when physically I actually wasn't, because I was too inconsistent with my nutrition, to where mentally you like feel a little bit burnt out because mentally you're engaged in the fat loss phase, but progress wise, you don't see that result. And then that's where frustration kicks in. So a big part of the priming phase too is all of those things I mentioned physiologically and like the hunger cues and all of that to see if you're ready for it. But another big part of the priming phase is to basically test and see, are we able to be consistent when our calorie goal is actually higher and our step goal is maybe lower, where theoretically hitting those targets should be easier versus so then when I go into a fat loss phase and maybe my calorie goal is a little bit lower and my step goal is a little bit higher and it's going to be a little bit more difficult, am I able to keep that consistency going? So hopefully that makes sense, Melinda, and answered your questions there. So really great questions this week. This was a fun Q&A. So let me know if you want me to do these weekly, and I will go ahead and maybe post these weekly, and because it's really cool to kind of just go through these questions and answer those for you guys. So that is all for this one, and I will see you guys in the next one.